So when Maria and I decided that we were going to go through this process, that we were going to first separate and then go through a divorce, I was seeing a therapist through my employee assistance program, and so I asked her for some potential, because we had talked about doing it through mediation, because mediation is it's more cost-effective way to go through it, and neither one of us hated each other. We had just come to the point in our relationship and our marriage where we decided to separate, and so we wanted to do it in a fashion that wouldn't cost us tens of thousands of dollars. So the therapist recommended, gave me a couple of options, and then I called Donna, and that's where we kind of first contacted.
Well, of course, I've never gone through this process before, so I didn't really know what to expect. And John kind of took the ball and did a lot of the initial research. And so when we first came here, but most of my concerns were the kids, and I think that you had a nice survey that we filled out, basically what I wanted to get, what John wanted to get out of it, and so that was really helpful so you knew what was important to both of us. It maybe not necessarily the same things, but so you knew what sides were, what we wanted from the divorce and what our major concerns was, where our, that's basically it, where our major concerns was. And for me, it was for the kids. I wanted to make sure the kids had something left that could go to them. We both have worked really hard, and we have a lot of investments, and want to make sure that we can make sure that those get passed down to the kids. And so I felt like, after going through the survey, I felt a little bit more confident. I never met Donna, didn't do any real research because John had done that. But so that initial, meeting was good. I mean, I felt like you were going to be thorough with that as far as our finances and how we divided them. Well, at first, initially, I thought, why do we have to do this? Because we kind of agreed on big ticket items, and that just seemed a little tedious to me. But then after our first initial meeting, there were things that we didn't take into consideration as far as how to divide it equally and fairly. Equally doesn't necessarily mean fairly. So the software was helpful in the fact that it could really give a big picture of how much my output was going to be a month, how much John's output was going to be a month, and how that could be fairly, split and amicable for both of us. That even though maybe I got more investments, but their monthly expenses, would outweigh that, because I may initially have got a big chunk, but if I still had a lot of output with my finances month to month, that really didn't even out. So I think that was a good way to get a picture of basically what our expenses were going to be with the kids, and just daily, and not just the financial, not just the investments as well. So
Typically when I'm faced with having to sit in front of a computer and go through software and fill in blanks, I avoid that kind of stuff. Just seems tedious. But I found that this software wasn't so bad once we got into it, and it was very helpful because it went item by item, and it didn't necessarily have to be completely 100% accurate. It was trying to get a snapshot, if you will, from both of our viewpoints as to what our expenses were, and what our assets were, and then from that we were able to start sitting down together and figure out what both of us wanted out of this, and it was real helpful in that regard. Well, I think that never having gone through this before, I don't know that we necessarily knew one way or the other. But in hindsight, in retrospect, it was helpful to have Donna's financial background, because she was able to explain things better to us. We were able to get a better picture of how to divide our assets, and it was also important to both of us that be fair. And with Donna's background, she was able to guide us through that, and was impartial. I felt impartial. There were times, of course, where I felt, well, she's not seeing my side, and then maybe there were times where Maria felt she wasn't seeing her side. But that's what impartiality is. It's you have to be listening to both parties and working with both parties. So.
Well, coming from having several friends that have gone through divorces, and this might be off topic a little bit, but I didn't want to do the lawyer route, but my friends were very skeptical of the whole mediator thing, because they didn't feel like a mediator was looking out for my best interest. And so coming in here, I was skeptical of John's decision to pick you, and I hadn't done my own research, so I was feeling a little bit insecure. There were a lot of, like you said, emotional issues I wasn't quite ready to let go of. Even though we had agreed to divorce, it's a process you have to go through, and you have to kind of work out through things. And but from our initial interaction, I really felt like Donna did her best to make sure that both sides were heard from, and she did a good job of, when things got emotional, diffusing that. And just kind of being real about, this is kind of what it is, and this is the best way of path. And I felt that she was very helpful as far as our investments go, and the best way to divide those out, because there's a pension involved, there's property involved, there's 401ks and 401cs, and to me those I felt were very I didn't know a lot about him, so I was always kind of skeptical and felt like, I'm maybe not very trusting, or I don't know, a little stupid sometimes because I didn't know. So through the process, we had our ups and downs, and it was emotional, but you just kind of get through that, and you start, once it kind of gets towards the end, and you feel like, I really felt like she did a good job meeting both of what we wanted to see the end result being. And initially we weren't really at that point. I mean, I think John had his idea of how he wanted it to go, and I had my idea of how I wanted it to go, and we were able to kind of put those together and make it work.
It did take us maybe longer than it would for some people to get through this. We had some breaks in between. We saw Donna several times, but it took us a while. So occasionally we had to take a month off just to kind of let everything settle in, and because it was a very emotional thing to go through. But in the end, by taking those breaks and then coming back to the table again, and coming together on what was right for our kids and what was fair for both of us, that it was the right process to go through, versus, because I've from the beginning, I didn't want this to be, of course it's emotional, but yeah, I didn't want it to be like war. I've seen too many people go through that. I don't want to have that much malice and ill will towards towards somebody that I've just spent, a quarter of my life, or like half of my life up to this point with, and so it took us a while, and but in the end we were able to come together and make it happen. So.
Well, as far as the girls go, I mostly, I kind of ran the ship when it came to them, and kind of made a lot of the decisions when it came to the girls. But the one thing that we both decided is that we really didn't want to turn them against either one of us, that was important to us. We didn't want to throw anybody under the bus. We didn't, but yet we wanted to make sure that they felt safe and secure, and that their life wasn't going to be turned upside down by the divorce. So, I mean, we decided to separate in July. I didn't move out until October. I mean, we really, that was a high priority for us to make sure that they felt safe and secure, and that their life wouldn't change a whole lot. And really, I really think they've, you know, except for Avery, maybe has kind of, because she's the one at home still and has to deal with, you know, this, that, and the other. But I really think they've come out pretty unscathed. I mean, I think they recognize that it's probably a better thing for us to be separated, and so I'm pretty pleased with how that's all worked out for them.
We, as our marriage progressed, we took on different roles in that marriage, and when the kids were little, I spent a lot more time with them and reading to them, and, you know, doing the baths and putting them to bed. But as they got older, mom stepped into the role of working with them in their hobby that they were all involved in, and tended to, while I was out, you know, trying to provide and work more. I think in some ways, as most of us do later in life, you think back on that and you wish maybe you had spent more time. And now I'm trying, now that we've gone through this, got older kids and they're all over 18, trying to spend more time with the girls and be more involved with them, and they're adults now basically, but that's been and the fact that we're getting along okay again through this process is helpful for them. It's a lot healthier scenario, so I think that's been part of this that's been a positive too.
And I do want to say, this is totally just something that I wanted to say, is that my friends who have gone through lawyers don't speak to their ex-husbands. They're on non-speaking terms, which has been very difficult for their children, and it's put the kids in a lot tougher situation. So by going through this process and maintaining communication, and yeah, there are days where I hate John. I'm sure there's days he hates me too. But I mean, that's, you know, I just feel like this was probably the better route for us than to get lawyers whose interests would be self-serving than mediation, which was more about trying to make sure there was an even divide and even fairness. So.
Well, I'd have to agree that there's been some really tense moments, tense weeks, some tense months throughout this, but I'm really, I think we're in a better place, and I'm really thankful that we were able to get through all of this and still be able to sit in the same room together and be able to talk about the kids, and which, while we were waiting just now, we were sitting out in the waiting room just talking about our kids, and we have that's our legacy together. They're really, you know, the most important part of this in the end.